Uncertainty, anxiety, and confusion. Words we hear all the time from our community, those living with an unruptured brain aneurysm, and those who have survived a brain hemorrhage. But how do we build resilience? How do we learn to live with worry every day? Welcome to Brain Aneurysms and Beyond, with me, Rebecca Middleton, a brain aneurysm patient and the founder of Hereditary Brain Aneurysm Support. We're a UK charity supporting patients with brain aneurysms and their families. In each episode, we'll delve into exciting research, share remarkable stories, and look at the clinical and medical information surrounding our condition. To help us understand how to build resilience and how to learn to live with worry, I spoke to psychotherapist Kym Winter, UK founder and clinical director of Rareminds. I started by sharing a little bit about my journey.
I was diagnosed with an aneurysm around about 10 years ago, and I underwent screening for an aneurysm because my grandmother and my mother both died of an aneurysm. So when I was told on that dark, wet Friday evening that I too had an aneurysm, I was immediately full with worry and fear because in my family, I thought that aneurysms meant death and tragic consequences. Fast forward a number of years when eventually it was decided that my aneurysm was the right size and shape and it was time to get it treated. And I underwent brain surgery around about 6 years ago. I was delighted that the surgery went well, but I was also delighted that I turned around the narrative in my family. So from me, aneurysms meaning death, now aneurysms meant life and moving forward. But through that journey, I lived with different levels of anxiety and worry and fear for myself, but also for my daughters and for my family as well. So, Kym, to start us off, and it's a big question, how can you live well with worry? And is it possible to balance it in our lives, to find that balance and to find a way of moving forward and cracking on with daily life while still dealing with something which is very troublesome in the background?
Thank you, Rebecca. It's a great question to lead on, of course, and it is a big question. I think your experience of your journey is in some ways quite a good reference point for other people, in that in my experience, and we talk to lots of people living with lots of different rare conditions, but they all have a similar theme of how do you live with uncertainty and fear and worry over time. And I think there are no easy answers to this, but there is often a different relationship that you develop to worry and uncertainty and fear over the course of your experience of living with a condition. And I think, you referenced yourself when you were first diagnosed with it, there was a huge amount of worry on your part. You were sort of consumed. And I think often, people are overwhelmed by fear and worry in the early stages. And that can be a really testing period. But it's not unusual. And I think it's really helpful for people in the early stages to know that fear and worry often abates over time. And it abates for a number of reasons, really. One is that you sort of get used to the information you've been given. I think you sort of described it almost like it sort of crashed in, even though you had prepared for it and you'd thought about it a lot and you'd thought about going for testing and screening, it still can feel quite overwhelming in the early days. And I think in those early days in particular, it's really helpful to remember to treat yourself gently. You're taking on board a huge amount of information, and you're doing a huge amount of emotional processing along with the information you're processing. So feeling quite overwhelmed is because you are quite overwhelmed. There is a lot happening in those early days, and you'll be making new relationships with new healthcare professionals and working out what it's all about. What is this going to mean? What's the path going to be going forward in terms of screening and being looked after by the healthcare professionals involved in your care. So I think those early days are often very full of fear and worry. I often think it's a bit like a wave breaking. It's a bit like a sort of a wave crashes over you. And then if you think of the sort of waves on the beach, they sort of become a little bit calmer over time. We also sort of develop, in my experience, a phrase we use quite a lot with people is we sort of develop psychological muscles for uncertainty. You know, we're often feeling like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to cope with living with this condition or what it might mean for me over time. And we sort of feel quite overwhelmed or weedy in the face of it. But actually, as time progresses, we sort of develop stronger psychological muscles for knowing how to sort of roll with the fact of it in your life. You can sort of lift it in a way that it feels just less heavy than it does in the early days. So often we say to people, you will develop muscles for uncertainty over time, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's a bit like going to the gym. You sort of learn to develop those muscles. And to some extent, you learn to develop those muscles by kind of little exercises and strategies and techniques to look after yourself along the way. And then you find they become a bit second nature. And one of the things I often think is so helpful with worry in particular is asking yourself the question quite pragmatically, is this a worry I can do something about? Is it an informative worry? If, for example, I'm worrying about not going to the gym because I'm worried about my health in the longer term, that's sort of a helpful worry because it reminds me I might need to go to the gym. So it's a sort of helpful worry that I can take action on or not. You know, or I might be worried I should be booking an appointment, but I haven't done it yet. That's a sort of helpful worry to spur us into action to look after ourselves. More unhelpful worries are those sort of niggling ones that often happen late at night, or there are no clear or straightforward actions that you can take to manage them. They're often the sort of what if worries. Yeah, what if? And they don't have easy, straightforward solutions or ways to manage. And I think when we're in the face of sort of those what if worries, often it's about how we look after ourselves and how we find ways to let those thoughts sort of pass, you know, to move on. Because if they get their grip on us, we can feel quite overwhelmed, can't we? They can be very preoccupying and anxiety starts to build and we can get very fearful. So sometimes we say to people, when you're in the grip of those what if worries or the sort of unhelpful worries, they don't have an obvious, you know, solution to them or action you can take. There's a number of simple things you can do. One I really like in my own life, because it's such a simple metaphor, is the idea of putting the worry on the shelf. It's quite literally shelving your worry. So it's the idea of imagining the thing that you're worried about and saying, I cannot do anything about this. It is outside of my control. And you imagine putting that thought worry in a box, closing the box and putting it very carefully in your mind on a shelf nearby and saying, that shelf can hold my worry. It'll be there for me if I want to pick it up again at another point. But I need to put it down right now. And then doing something else, sort of distract yourself or get on with your life or do a sort of relaxation exercise to help you get back to sleep. But sometimes it's that idea of our worries are trying to help us out, but sometimes they slightly overplay their hand. So trying to sort of keep them safe and put them down somewhere can be really, really helpful in the short term. But I think, you know, one of the things that's really important if anyone's listening to this and feeling a bit tired out by worrying or feeling very in the grip of anxiety, you're not on your own with those sorts of struggles, you know, and there are other people around for whom that sort of struggle will be very familiar to them too. And I know at HBA you have sort of support groups and ways of linking up, because often we need to know that other people get it too. It's a bit like when someone says to us, yeah, no, I get that. I really understand what you're going through there. Somehow that helps us feel a bit calmer too. We're not odd. We're not on our own. It's sort of, yeah, we get it. We get it. It's not easy, but there are ways over time where it feels easier. But it does take time sometimes. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially that, you know, you're not alone. When I went looking for information, you know, did those 3 a.m. Google searches, which you know you shouldn't do.
Yes, absolutely.
When you've just been diagnosed, you're after that I don't know, that kernel of information that will appease you, reassure you, or inform you. But you're also desperately trying to find somebody like you. And that was one of the reasons actually why I set up HBA, because I knew that there were other people like me. I just struggled to find them. And it was fantastic when I started connecting with other people on different Facebook groups, as well, to kind of, realize that I wasn't alone. And also that they understood what I was going through, because it also feels a very lonely journey sometimes. You can talk to families, you can talk to friends, and of course they're really great and they try and understand what you're going through. But it is a journey. You know, how I felt that shock, as you say, that wave, when I just felt that wave over me and I was just collapsed in a heap. When I was trying to process that, you know, you struggle up back on your feet, and then you learn to kind of walk again, but you are living with this kind of the knowledge. And also that reassurance of people, you know, like I say to kind of different people in our community now, it's something that you will learn to live with, and having that trust that you do have that capacity and that resilience, that you will get there. It seems overwhelming now, but that's not where you're going to be next year or the year after or the year after. And this journey is so different and unique for all patients and all families. Yeah. And I also suppose, because of, you know, what aneurysms can mean in your family, for me, it meant, you know, tragedy, the tragic loss of my grandmother and my mother. So again, changing that narrative, or if you're not able to change that narrative, learning about other stories. And that's, again, what we are really excited to do at HBA, is bring other people's stories, so you can go, yes, you can live well with an aneurysm. It can be very safely treated and you can move forward. As well. But, you know, you can't believe what you can't see. So we're very much trying to bring different experiences and stories. But as you say, it's a complete journey of diagnosis through sometimes watch and wait, sometimes it's a treatment, and then post-treatment, how you kind of, again, move forward with your life. But that journey perhaps sometimes, or very often, starts with screening. And that is, you know, a big sort of crossroads really at people's lives. You know, if they are aware they have a family history and maybe they've been offered screening, or they are interested in speaking to their GP about screening, it's not an easy decision to make, of course, because once you know, then you can't unknow. And again, that's a question that we get quite often, is what's the right choice for me? And there is no right choice. It's what's right for you at that time. So what are your kind of top tips, or how can people work through what is a really tricky kind of question of, should I undergo screening, and can I handle those consequences perhaps? Yeah, I think, you know, you're saying something really important, which is people come to the idea of screening at different times and in different ways, and feeling ready for screening is sort of I'm not sure you ever feel quite ready for screening, but perhaps it feels that you want to take that step at one point in your life that you might not have done at another. And I know sometimes when we talk to people, it's sometimes helpful to walk up to the idea of screening, find out what it would mean, what it's about, what it would involve. And there's sometimes people feel able to take that step quite quickly. You know, depends what you're like. You know, some people like, yes, I definitely want to know. Others need to sort of come round to the idea, and it might take a long time. Some people need to walk up to it for a bit and then walk away from it again. And I think the thing with screening, where over time, there's not many people that we have seen through our doors at Rareminds who have regretted, let's say, going through a screening process. It's a very big thing to do. But of course, once you do know, you are in a position to be on a pathway to have particular care or support, or make particular decisions about your life or your future that can feel quite empowering. But I think that process of screening, I often say to people, unless there's a very good medical reason why there is an urgency there, it can be very helpful to walk up to it, take your time, pause, come back to it again.
because it's important to do it at the right time for you as an individual. And that's everyone, we're all very different in that regard, aren't we? Some people like to know up front very quickly. Others need to sort of get your head around it a bit more, kind of work up to it. So I think timing is very important. And talking to people who know you, as well as medical professionals, talk about it as a decision that you're considering. What do they think? Gather information for them. And then, make your decision when you feel ready. I'm curious to know whether it was a difficult decision for you or whether it was something that you felt actually I want to do, but it's about the time. Or...
Yeah, I was determined that I wanted to know. I suppose there was another motivation there, that I was considering extending our family, so trying for another baby. So it's like, oh, perhaps I should know before we go on that kind of a journey. So, but my genetic counselor and my neurosurgeon spent a lot of time going, well, what happens if there is an aneurysm? Hopefully there won't be, but what happens if there is? And this is what the pathway would look like. How do you feel about that? So that was really useful for me, because it's kind of seeing over the wall. Could I cope with what's over the wall? And once I did get that diagnosis, perhaps didn't come as a great shock, but it still comes as a shock. It's a hereditary condition, so it shouldn't be a huge surprise that I had it, but at the same time, it was, as you say, that wave hitting me. And then just a matter is, as you say, that everybody's care pathway from that point on looks a bit different. And I was on that kind of the watch and wait pathway. But ultimately screening saved my life. Ultimately, screening is why I'm here today, because if I wasn't screened, then my growing aneurysm perhaps wouldn't have had the treatment. I was in and out of hospital within 48 hours and back at work the next week. I am very grateful for my care and very grateful for my screening, but also have other members of my family who've said, no, don't want to know.
Yeah.
That's why we would say it's absolutely fine. There is no right or wrong answer. It's just your answer. Your answer for where you are. And other people, perhaps because we had been through, a tragic set of circumstances, as you say, needed that time, needed to kind of walk away, process what they were going through with the kind of grief, and then walk back to it. And at a later stage, when they felt sort of emotionally stronger, to deal with whatever may come their way. So I think that's a really good tip, that there is no rush. Unless there is a huge medical need, to take your time. And as you say, I like that analogy of walking up to it, having a bit of a look, walking back, and then going back again.
And it's okay to change your mind. Sometimes we talk to people in this that I've really not wanted to go for testing. That's not for me. I just want to sort of see what happens. And then there comes the point where something changes and people go, oh, actually, I think I might want to, but I've said I firmly don't want to. And now I seem to be changing my mind. And that's all right as well. That's what we're like as people, isn't it? We can change our mind about things.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult. You're touching on something too within families that can be challenging as well, when perhaps, I don't know, one sibling may want to go for testing and another may not. And how you rub along together with that different decision making can sometimes feel a tension, I think. And it's back to that idea too of we're all different and we all make different decisions about our lives at different times. But I'm just sort of noticing and speaking to the fact that we're aware sometimes it can cause tensions between people too, if one wants to go ahead.
Yes, it can cause tensions and worry. And that's one of the questions that we also get a lot from the community, is adults worried about children or perhaps the members of their family now in the NHS. Screening is, because it's an adult onset condition, and luckily very, 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 very very, very rare in children, which is, great to hear. But it just means then that screening isn't available till you are in your adulthood, and usually sort of over 18 and well into your 20s is when it's advised. But then how can we as parents, certainly it's something that I do every day, I look at my two daughters. Familial aneurysms often run through maternal lines, as they have done in my family. So I look at my daughters and go, gosh, is this pattern going to continue? How do you live with that kind of worry as well? And again, I suppose from my perspective, it's something that I have had to go on the shelf with you. But, it does creep back, those 3 a.m. thoughts. Inevitably, it does.
Yeah. And I think, again, there's no easy solutions to this one, Rebecca. You're talking about something that is a challenge, that there's a possibility that your children may inherit the condition, and too that there's not sort of testing or screening available for that until much older. And I think it's back to that kind of, is this a worry I can do something about, or is this a worry I have to put down? And sort of trying to find that psychological flexibility within yourself, really. The thoughts will visit, as you know, the thoughts will come up. What if, oh gosh, I hope not, or this makes me feel very sad or guilty if this is going to be part of their life going forward. But I suppose I have a couple of thoughts about that, which is, one is young people are incredibly resilient. We often forget that when we hear so much about, young people's mental health and, all that. But often young people are very resilient, and you are doing something very powerful by modelling to them as their parent that you can live well with this condition, that you engage with healthcare, that you've had surgery, that you are getting on with your life. It is part of your life. It is not all of your life. And that's a very helpful message for your children to witness, and our children to witness going forward, that we can live with very difficult conditions that may impact us over time, that care is available, medical support is out there, and life carries on. So it's a sort of, it's a way of trying to remind yourself of that too, when you're in the grip of a sadness, a worry, or an anxiety about their future or their health, that actually you're doing it, you're getting on with it. They will find their own ways of doing it too. And of course, their experience is going to be different to yours. You are living with your condition. There is not a loss that they will be facing in quite the same way that you faced the loss of your mum and your grandmother. So I think also trying to reassure yourself that with very many conditions, care and medical support is improving all the time. So for every generation, there is the hope and the aim that living with a condition is going to be better than for the previous generation. So sometimes, I live with a rare condition that my children have too, that they inherited from their father. So that's often something I hold up in my mind when I'm looking at them and thinking, I worry about the future for them. I sort of go, actually, medical treatments, advances, improvements are happening all the time. And it's important to remember that the experience of a condition will be their own. And they will have a strong role model in you or in others around them to live well with their condition. It's part of their life, if it's going to be, and it's not going to be all of their life. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that more that, every journey is unique, because it's their life. And ultimately they will make the choice whether to get screened or not. I'd like them to, but it is their choice when they become adults. So we've again heard from our community sometimes, the frustrations from parents when children perhaps won't get screened, and and that is sometimes really hard to live with, and again put down and let them make the choice. But again, any thoughts around that, of how you can just almost let it go so it doesn't create that tension within families?
Yeah, I think that's really challenging. And all I can say to parents really is that, you know, there's a sort of clash, isn't there, between sort of adolescence, when you're sort of immortal as a young adult. You can't even contemplate the idea that something would happen to you, or you could even die at some point, you know, long way in the future, hopefully. But there's sort of, it doesn't quite connect with that needing to go out and live your life and spread your wings. And how do you then incorporate this idea of, oh, I might have a condition that would stop me doing that or interfere with it in some way, or is certainly a complication. And I think for a lot of young people, there's a kind of kicking it into the long grass. You know, young people are great at denial, and they're great at that sort of, oh, it'll be fine, because that's part of the sort of adolescent mindset that helps them get out into the world. And I think all you can do as a parent is try and not make it a source of conflict. You can hold your position, which is something that you think it would be very important and helpful for their own health and well-being going forward. And you'll support them in going for screening as and when they want to do that, and you think it would be a good idea. But ultimately, the decision has to be theirs. Because otherwise, if you hold as a parent all the desire for them to have testing, it doesn't allow them to find their own desire for, might that be a good idea for me in due course? So something about hold your line, but try not let it become a source of conflict. Easier said than done, I know, as a parent of adolescents.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I suppose as well, as we are going through our journeys as well, and sometimes even when you've had an aneurysm fixed, as I have, there's still a worry that, okay, I might be at increased risk of getting another one. I'm a woman, that's a risk factor. I'll soon be postmenopausal, that's another risk factor. Yeah. That it's never done. You know, it's never, you're never treated, and, you know, you think, okay, I'm good now. And then there's that annual scan, or every 2 years, every 3 years. So sometimes it's the worry kind of, I feel it like a roller coaster, that, you know, I'm coming up to my scan time, which is, it's always in January, which is like a rotten time because it's always on your mind, you know, over Christmas and New Year as well. But, you know, so that's, and then, you know, you get a good result. Yeah, and then you kind of go down and you manage it again, but then, well, scan time comes again. So again, any kind of tips of managing that with kind of annual scans, annual checkups, discussions with neurosurgeons, because then you have to take it off the shelf. There is a time when I'm taking, you know, and I have to deal with this. I have to face up to it. I have to discuss how my health is, how it's changed, so we can make sure I'm on the right treatment and medicines and whatever. So when you have to take that box off the shelf, any kind of top tips of managing that roller coaster?
Yeah, and it is a real roller coaster, isn't it? You know, I can say to people, you know, scan anxiety is a real thing. You know, it's not a kind of, you know, made up thing. It's very real. And that kind of build up to scans and the worry because you're having to sort of face that condition. It's coming into view again, I suppose, in a way that you might have been able to put it to one side a bit more. So often we say to people, look, accept that you are carrying more worry during those periods of time. It's a bit like your muscle, you know, those psychological muscles are having to work harder in the run up to a scan, during a scan, and while you're waiting for results too. So just as the way of if you were having to do a lot of sort of physical work on a particular muscle, you might try and not overstrain it by adding other things to that period of time of your life. So sometimes we say to people, look, try and not do too many other big things during that period. You're already doing a lot of emotional work by keeping yourself steady in the run up to a scan, during the scan, and while you're waiting for results. And that should not be underestimated. You know, you're doing a lot of psychological work, holding yourself together in a way when, you know, you could receive news that would be very difficult to hear. So the worry and the anxiety in the run-up, during and after is very understandable. So I think my tip is really, how can you best look after yourself during that period? You know, try and perhaps not take on big work projects, or kind of manage your time so you've got a bit more rest time. Try and look at your timetabling and your weeks and your months to allow for the extra emotional work that you're going to be doing during that period. And sometimes I say to people too, it can help to have really simple phrases in mind when you're going through that period, which is, right now, I don't have to do anything but go for the scan. I don't have to deal with the results and go with the scan all in one go. Just deal with the next thing. Yeah. Just go for the scan, make it as easy and straightforward as you can. Try and give yourself some time off afterwards just to sort of settle again. And then deal with the next bit. Deal with either the waiting or deal with the results appointment. But sometimes we compress and try and deal everything in our mind all together. And that's too much worry. Take each little bit a step at a time. You only have to go for the scan today. Then there's the next stage. So break it up into little compartments. That can help a bit too.
Yeah, no, I like that. I will definitely be doing that in January next year.
And the other thing I always say too, Rebecca, is I am so massive on treats after scans. It's become a bit of a joke when I talk to people. Is like, do something nice afterwards. And I was talking to someone recently. She went, I've got such a good treat habit going now, where there's a really great shoe shop in a shopping centre near where her hospital is. She actually goes and buys a new pair of shoes every time she goes for a scan. So there's
I love that. I go for a hot chocolate. I just need to up my game.
Exactly.
I need to up my game. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny, but it is reminding us that, you've done a really big piece of emotional work in going for a scan. Acknowledge that and reward yourself afterwards. Say, well done me. I've been really grown up about this. Yeah. And find that little reward afterwards, whatever it is, a hot chocolate or, watching your favourite film in the evening, whatever, but something that just says, well done me.
Yeah, no, I love that. All of those top tips are coming out back in next January.
Okay.
I suppose last question, our time is coming to an end, is that empowering, as you say, that kind of empowerment of treating yourself, of acknowledging yourself, and always validating yourself that, yes, you are going through a tough time. Yes, you can hang back and not give all your energy to everything and to focus on yourself. And that is good. And that is, you are worthy of that time and attention. Where can people go for more information? Where can people go to kind of get, again, some more kind of top tips and perhaps a reminder of everything we've discussed today?
Yeah. So one of the things at Rareminds we've produced recently is our Wellbeing Hub, where we've put together a series of resources and sections around the common themes that people come and talk to us about at Rareminds, and we know are particular challenges across all rare conditions, really. And that includes things like managing uncertainty or dealing with change and loss or coping with diagnosis. And we've also got a section on little sort of techniques for dealing with difficult feelings too. So when you are in the grip of a particular difficult feeling, whether it's worry or fear, anxiety, little techniques that can help it feel more manageable or to pass in time. Sometimes we have to hold on to the idea that all feelings pass in time. So the Rareminds Wellbeing Hub is up on our website, and I think you can post a link to that after this recording too. So I'd really encourage people to go and have a look and see what speaks to you, really.
Thank you, Kym, for all that useful insight and that valuable advice here on Brain Aneurysms and Beyond. And thank you, Rob Burney, our producer, for all your help in producing today's podcast episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It really does help us to reach more people and continue these important conversations. You can find out more about what we do at Hereditary Brain Aneurysm Support on our website, hbasupport.org. Thank you for joining us.